So we are excited to be here with you to talk about whatever is on your mind. Okay, so one of the things that I find to be really helpful in navigating any time, let alone times of uncertainty, is this idea of a morning routine. So one of my friends, Leanne Buchanan, talks about MSP time. So MSP time is mental, spiritual, and physical. So these are times in the morning that I take just for me, to reconnect with my spiritual side, to connect with my body, and to get out of kind of my normal day-to-day thing. This is when I use my imagination. This is when I look at things that I want to work on about myself. This is a time for forgiveness. And then this is also a time when I am looking to see how I can be of service to humanity. So this is actually where this idea came from. My morning run was a time when I thought, gosh, it'd be really nice, since I do talk to people all day long about how to improve their businesses, and for creative people, how to create businesses that are successful, to think about how I might be able to combine my interest in helping people with something that feels very uncertain right now, which is what is happening in the world, especially for creative people. I personally believe that this time is going to be one where we look back and we say, oh my goodness, this is when so much new was created in the terms of the way that we are together, and in the way that we are with our families, in the way that we are in public, and also in the way that we are with our work. So everybody all of a sudden is doing remote work. They've had to become creative. And isn't it interesting that the old ways, which I feel like people who are attached to the old ways are doubling down on the ways that they want to anchor in that way of being and that power. And then the rest of us are just overnight just adapting without even thinking about it to new ways of being. So what is coming up for you? I hope you will let me know what's on your mind. I'm doing this for you. So if you have something specific that you're thinking about, hey there, Maven, good to see you. Hi to everybody who's joining us. I know a lot of people will watch this afterwards. So the way that I do that, again, I have my MSP time, mental, spiritual, physical, and I'm a little maybe extreme. My boyfriend says, like, isn't it great that you have like 2 or 3 hours of self-care before you even get started with your work? And to me, it really is self-care. But you know, there is something about being gentle to yourself and allowing yourself space to reconnect with your body and your spirit, and your imagination, which is especially important to me, being a person who believes in practical creativity, that is really nurturing. So I start my day, I get up, I go right into the other room, I do some physical exercises to just kind of like wake up my body. These are really mild, like, you know, turning your head, they're like arm rolls. You just kind of like move your hips, you do some semi squats, that kind of thing. So it's really gentle. And then I go right into kind of a little bit of character building, which for me is, how did I do as a human being yesterday? What are the things that I want to correct? What are the things that I made progress on? And celebrating, you know, the things that went really well. There's never a manual to how to be a human. But I really do believe in being the best person you possibly can be. And if you're never looking at that, you're not showing up in your maximum with your friends, with your family, with your partner, and in your work. So being a solo person, a solopreneur, an entrepreneur who works primarily by myself, I work with a lot of people, but generally I'm working here in my space by myself. Hey, Patty. So it really, for me, is just a question of my own energy. And I know that personally, if I'm not on that quest to be a better person, if I'm not assessing how it's going and making a resolution for how I want to be going forward, I just kind of go day by day, and I don't even know at the end of the year what I've done with my life. So for me, that kind of like daily accountability, checking in and seeing, you know, where I have some weaknesses that I want to work on, and certainly conversations that went well, But then I kind of like bless away the stuff that didn't go so great. I practiced self-compassion for a couple of minutes because being an artist, I'm pretty hard on myself, and coming up, being raised in the household I was, where the expectations were extremely high, and they weren't impossible, but my family had high standards, and I was expected to be my best self. It wasn't acceptable, and you knew when you fell short, and as a human being when you're falling short of your best. So for me, it's very important that I'm accountable to myself and that I fill myself up. I practice compassion with myself every morning, including days when I'm overly critical of myself. So that doesn't serve me, and that doesn't serve my clients. But allowing myself space to just be, to reconnect with my spirit, with my person, with myself, and I exercise out in nature. I usually go for a 5-mile run. By no means am I recommending that you do my routine, okay? So let's just get that clear. My routine is something that I developed over the course of a long time. And I was always kind of in the sphere of somebody important in my life who I was learning from. My friend Michael Ness tuned in yesterday. It was really great to see him. He used to be one of my colleagues at Carnegie Hall, and he would, I don't know, we'd cross paths running in Central Park. So it was kind of neat to have an accountability partner in that way, a friendly face that I knew I'd see. Hey, Jesse, how are you? Good to see you. So that's kind of where things started with my routine, where I've come to. I realized that for me, I'm gonna fill my cup because no one else can or will. And that's very important for me to understand kind of how to do that. And for me, that is physical activity, that is meditation, connection with my spirit, my higher self. And then also, really thinking about what am I bringing to the world? Where am I falling short? What do I want to work on? So, so Jesse just joined us. I think you're here from San Francisco. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your work, and also we're talking about roles and rituals, not roles and rituals, rituals and routines and habits. And I'm a big believer that having a strong basis, some way to kind of anchor yourself, and being a classical musician, you warm up before you play with other people. So that's kind of how I see that. But what kinds of routines and habits do you have that really ground your work or ground your practice?
Well, my practice, I'm a choreographer, so a lot of my routines and rituals are based around rehearsal.
Mm-hmm.
So unfortunately, it's kind of hard to do that right now because of social distancing and self-quarantining, and sort of respecting people's boundaries around their health.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right now it's kind of restricted to like texting people or Facebook messaging, and at least checking in
Mm-hmm.
and making sure people are okay and just maintaining that connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really difficult to sort of maintain my practice when a lot of it has to do with contact and being in the same room with people.
Right. So so you're doing a lot online, and what are the challenges that you're facing around that? How is that kind of like forcing you to rethink your routines?
Like I've been so caught up with other things, I haven't, like it's sort of been pushed to the back because a lot of my performances has been canceled through June at least. A lot of that is just sort of rethinking, well, what does the rest of the year look like in terms of performance? When does that start to happen? Like how soon can I get people back into the studio to start dancing?
Right.
What that's going to look like, and just sort of how all this feeds into it. Like I had this idea about, well, the streets are empty. That's a stage. I could very easily do a performance based around keeping the audience 6 feet apart from each other and like dancing in those spaces between people and like really pushing that boundary of contact. Well, like how close is too close, or what's uncomfortable or comfortable for people. So I've been thinking a lot about, well, this is going to change. Like, how can I speak to this in my work right now?
I love that. And I think it's so interesting to think about that, really looking at what we're required to do and the boundaries that we're kind of being forced into right now, and how that can be kind of an artistic construct. So like, how do you create around that and see it not as a barrier, but like an access point, an entry point into the work?
Well, and just even walking around, that is part of my routine. Is I need to get out of the house on
Yeah.
the days that it's sunny. Like I need to feel sun and fresh air in my skin, and just walk. I live in the Castro, so walk around and seeing all these businesses that have boarded up, literally, like they've put plywood in front of their windows, for I assume for protection, and some like seeing, well, who hasn't, like who is staying open, or at least who hasn't put up the boards.
Right.
Interesting. So there's all this dead space, and there's lots of talk in the Castro about how these businesses that have been there for 30 years are closing shop because of rents. So
Right.
there's kind of discussion around, well, this is public space. I can use this now because there's no one here. So that's been a thought.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, I know they're like the Miami Foundation and the Knight Foundation here in Miami both have programs that are specifically about and for public space.
Mhm.
And you just brought up public space as well, and thinking about like repurposing storefronts and that kind of thing for the public. That's something that also we've had a couple developers from time to time here in Miami repurpose their own space that was between tenants or unoccupied and dedicated specifically to the artists to do with what they will. But it kind of calls into question right now, like what is a public space?
Mhm.
Is it kosher to have a public space? We just got the shelter in place order last night. So, I haven't been to our little park at the end of the street yet today, but there were definitely a lot of people there in the past couple of days. So public spaces do seem to be something that we need. But I think whether it's physical public space or other kinds of public space like we're doing right now, I mean, this stream really is open to anybody. So
Well,
cool.
definitely you've been seeing this like in Italy, where people are just leaning out their windows and singing to each other as a means of connection. And you're seeing it like this has happened here too, where people are just stepping outside of their houses and starting to sing. Someone would lead them. And it's like, okay, that's great. It's still respecting the social distancing or physical distancing. Again, like I wish they would be a little more cautious about how they word things, but yeah, it was glorious. It's like, this is great. This is sort of rethinking who is the performer, who is the audience.
I love that. I actually so my friend Corey was telling me about this online dance party that's like completely gone, I don't know, I want to say parabolic. Let's just say parabolic instead of the alternative. Um, where people are really, they have a ritual now where they connect together and this like massive online dance party with a DJ. And I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to. One of the things I hope to do this weekend. But there's a ritual also around like my parents are in Ohio. I rarely see them. I mean, we talk on the phone, but this whole social distancing thing has actually brought me into closer touch with them. We're going to have like a virtual dinner tomorrow night where we're all just going to eat at the same time. We're in the same time zone. There's no barriers. It's just like family dinner, which I never really would have thought to do, even though we're in the same time zone. I just have never thought of doing that. So I think that this time has kind of caused us to be creative and even called our own routines with our families and what we see as kind of personal internal and what could be like the next level of social space, which is still family but at a distance, but
Right.
now you're kind of like bridging that distance. So it never occurred to me, family dinner, but now we can do it.
Well, it's interesting because I've seen lots of posts on Facebook of people asking, what day is this? And because of the disruption of routines, like, I don't go to work. What do I do?
Yeah.
It's like, well, with artists, like, well, we go to work whenever we want to. So for us, it's kind of easier to manage, but seeing other people disrupted that way is kind of interesting. It's like, oh,
It's so true.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I was trained as a professional musician, so I got into the rhythm, which is very different from the rhythm I'm in now. But where I would stay up very late practicing and making reads and looking at new repertoire and listening and score study. And there was one summer where I was like dog sitting for my oboe teacher, and his wife plays violin, and he said, look, at any music in the house, you can have access to any oboe cane you want, just go and play. And I took that very literally. So I disrupted my routine because I wanted to make use of the space that I was in. I know there are a lot of people displaced right now who
Mhm.
are sharing spaces with maybe even some of the people that they don't really know that well, but they're taking it as an opportunity to really maximize the environments that they're in. Cool. So yeah, so I wanted to talk about routines, rituals, and habits. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about, so there's this book called Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg. And I'm always reading like 14 books at once, so it takes me a long time to finish them because I'm a little I don't know, I like variety. So I have enough of one and then I'll move to another. And it's been really neat to bring back more reading into my life now. I feel like after dinner now, if I'm in bed, I'm reading, which is kind of neat. But there's this book called Tiny Habits, which my friend Siggy had introduced to me. And the premise is basically like, you think that big changes happen from things like this. This is a big shift, and I think big things are happening as a result of it. I mean, this is reaching every area of the world, right? But his BJ Fogg's premise really is that the most formative things that happen in your life are actually the result of small things that are daily and frequent. So when you look at, I'm just looking at like how many people are getting their time back right now, like families who are always driving kids around and commuters. My commute is very short. It's like right here in my kitchen, you know. But there are people who now have 2-3 hours back in their day that they didn't have before. So I think that's really a powerful thing to think about. Like, what do you do if suddenly you have all this space that used to be taken up by smaller things? What is a small thing that you could do or that you're inspired to do, even if it's like 10 minutes of breathing, that will make a significant impact in your life? And I'm a big fan of that whole, you know, one positive thought per day, one positive thought per hour, one positive thought per minute, like really changes the shape of you as a human being over time, because you just get to be more aware and you get to practice more positive thinking. So for me, you know, that kind of approach really changed my life at one point, where I looked and I said, I'm not sure that my choices about what I'm thinking are really healthy. So small thoughts add up to big ideas, but also, you know, a tiny habit like how often you're standing up and how many steps you take per day, or making your bed, they say, like launch into all sorts of other kinds of productive behavior. Okay, so Jesse wanted to know what's the name of the book. It's called Tiny Habits. It's by BJ Fogg. I think it has 2 G's, Fogg. So one of the 14 books that I'm reading right now. Cool. I also wanted to take this opportunity to really just give people a tool. And I had originally set this up. I wasn't sure if anyone would join me on Zoom. So I had a little camera stand happening and now I don't have it. So bear with me, everybody. Trying to make this as accessible as I can. Oh, and then Fada joined us. Okay, so my favorite tool is white paper. So oftentimes when I'm coaching people, I'll just say, like, take a piece of white paper and fold it into thirds. Now what we're gonna do with this is to set you up to, and you don't have to do it now, but just listen. So you wanna divide it into 3. And in your left column, I would say, this is an activity you can write down now, but you will want a couple minutes to kind of like digest and do it on your own, which is first column all the way to the left. When do you feel the best? And when do you get your best ideas? So for me, definitely my running ritual, my spiritual ritual, there are times when I'm quiet, which is when I get my best ideas. It's not when I'm racing around actively trying to solve something. Sometimes it's while I'm sitting there listening to a client, I'll be thinking about a situation that was kind of similar to that, but that involved a different solution. And all of a sudden my brain will see a connection and boom, we have a new solution. But oftentimes it's not when I am actively speaking, it's when I am kind of quiet or I'm in a listening mode. I guess listening is like receiving. So think about, when do you feel your best and when do you get your best ideas? So when is that? Maybe that's in the shower. Maybe that's when you're cleaning. My mom gets all her great ideas when she is cleaning and she's rocking out to ABBA. It's like her thing. Second column, what does it take for you to get into that state? So first, when you get your best ideas, when do you feel the best? For some people, it's getting into nature. So what does it take for you to actually get into that state? If it's the showers where you have your best ideas, you just get into the shower, right? If it's exercise, you just make sure you're exercising. To be in nature, maybe it's a little more challenging now, depending on where you're living. If you're in Italy, I don't think you're allowed to leave your house, but to your point, you could go out on your balcony to be in nature-ish. And then the third column is reflections and insights. So what does it mean, what you've just learned, when you get your best ideas, when you feel your best, and what does it take you to get into that state? Then what will you do with that information? So for me, it's kind of like, if I feel the best and I get my best ideas right after meditation when I'm running, what does it take for me to get into that state? It's those two things. And then what does it mean? What does that mean to me? How am I going to reflect on that? So for me, that implies an action, which is kind of like a commitment to do something with that. So knowing that, and here you can read my chicken scratch here, but here's the three columns. But what it means for me is, in order to be my best and in order to have my, to get into the situations where I'm at my best, I need to commit to doing those things frequently. So again, that's one of the reasons I brought up the routine as an idea to help ground us. So a lot of times I find when I'm coaching or when I'm working with a client, people don't think about when they're at their best. They just go right to solving. And it's my personal opinion that you solve better when you're actually in a state of rest, when you're in a state of quiet. If you're turning and you're anxious and you're fearful, which is all the things we could be right now, right? You're not going to be able to access those great ideas, creative insights, solutions. So this is just intended to help you have a roadmap for thinking about how you purposely optimize an aspect of your life. So this is a tool you can use to make a routine or a ritual or a habit, which is just based on what works best for you. And I know people are talking about self-care right now. There's a lot on our minds about like preserving ourselves and hunkering down, and that hoarding instinct comes from, wanting to be safe and wanting to have control. But the idea of a ritual really gives you a sense of control because it grounds you. It's something that only you can choose. So going back to the beginning when I was talking about becoming a better person on purpose, a routine that you instill, which again, the third column here is kind of like inviting you to create a ritual or to create a way of being or an activity or just an insight around your best self and when and how you access it. These all give you the groundwork, a framework for actually perpetuating that, for doing that on purpose. A lot of times I talk about, let's be successful on purpose. So I think a lot of times, just like, again, when you're a professional musician, you warm up. So that gets you primed and ready to create, to be creative. It's the same thing with a routine. So might you start a routine, might you start a new habit when everything is uncertain and people are shaken out of their normal? This is an excellent time to actually look at what we're doing and insert some control based on what makes us feel our best, what optimizes us as human beings, us as creative people, us as family members, whatever it happens to be. You can use this time to create a ritual and to move forward with a new output. So what if you were optimal every day for at least 10 minutes? So another thing is, if you have a ritual or routine that you're just starting it is really important that you put a time limit on it, because you're not going to stick with something unless it feels good and unless you feel like it's actually something you look forward to and it's something fun. So for me, I know that like an hour and a half of meditation doesn't sound very fun to some people, and exercise, it's kind of both of those things combined. But for me, that really fills my cup, and it creates a different day for me. So that's become an anchor for me, and it's something that I definitely look forward to every day. Again, I'm not suggesting anyone has my routine. It's what works for me. So the whole point of this tool is just to get you thinking about, when are you at your optimal? What does it take for you to get there? And then what will you do with that information? If you end up saying, I want to make a new habit, or I want to try something new, give yourself 3 days, 10 minutes per day. Just chip away at it. Just see what happens, because after 3 days, you might be in a new pattern. And if you're feeling optimal and you're feeling really good, or you have something to ground you and take you out of the feelings of fear or the feelings of anxiety, the feelings of uncertainty, you have the start of something that little by little, just like BJ Fogg is suggesting, little by little, 10 minutes a day can really make the difference in whether you, what you do, who you become. It's not about doing, it's about becoming. But those tiny little things, tiny habits do add up. So maybe this is a time you could experiment with being optimal and having fun with that. So does anyone have any questions? I see Lisa, I see Eric. Good to see everybody. No questions. I know we want to give it a minute just in case. I see Patty joined.
Oh, Marta?
Yeah.
You described 3 columns. Is there a 4th column?
There's no 4th column because it's just, it's like an 8.5 by 11 folded into 3. So when do you feel your best, or when do you have your best ideas? Middle column is what does it take for you to get into that state? And then the third one is your reflections or insights from doing the first 2 columns. What does that mean? What will you do with this? If you decide to do a habit or a new ritual, how long will that be? Very short, hopefully, so you stick with it. And just experiment. I always encourage people, if you haven't done something before and you're not sure what's going to happen, or you don't feel like you can commit to it, do something micro, do something super baby, so that you can just see what happens. And again, if this is about like optimizing you and just exploring when you're at your best, building a ritual around the fun of being your best self, you can see what happens. So I don't think we have any questions. So with that, I want to thank you, Jesse, for joining us. Thank you for everybody on Instagram, all those who joined us on Facebook. And do let us know, what topics do you want to explore? What's on your mind? How can we be helpful? How can we hold space for you and help you optimize wherever you want to be in the coming whatever period of time? So I hope you all have an amazing day. I will see you another time. Thank you. Bye.